Hello everybody, and welcome into my little lore cave from my game, Midnight Dawn of Darkness. In this episode, we're covering the story of Fehone's fight to determine the creation of a new celestial body within the universe of Endon, caused by the celestial voting. What exactly that entails, and how 6 relatively low-life nobodies rose to form one of the strongest companies and gangs within the island of Fehone, under the name of E-Corp. This episode will uncover the whole story of the celestial voting, with a severe focus on the Gang Wars of Fehone during this time, the historical importance of these events, and how this shaped the world of Valencia and M.Dot's universe, so that those wishing to know more about them for their own games and stories, or for those who wish to have more understanding of the lore of M.Dot's universe, can get proper clarification of these major historical events. Sit back, enjoy, and grab some hot cocoa and some popcorn as we talk about Fehone and the story of a power struggle for the yet-to-be-born planet. Act 1. Define creation. Our story today begins 20 years after the Dark Moon War, in a peaceful era for Valencia, during which the discovery of Cavalieric energy begins being greatly developed upon, with the birth of new Cavaliers and inevitable agreement of the usage of their limitless soul energy as power suppliers leads to many of the world's capitals and trade center cities being powered off of Cavalieric soul energy, while the external cities that were once powered by demonic soul energy rebuilt their structure and frameworks prior to the Dark Moon War. While it's a peaceful time, the need for mass materials around the world, the response to the end of the chains, and the overall reconstruction effort has left many things to be desired within the current state of Valencia, one of which involves the return of the Creator, the now last of the old gods, reborn again. It's complicated, go watch last episode. As Thagard III met with the Creator, most alchemists, the Colored Ways, and dragons mostly knew of his existence, with some catching rumors and interesting side pieces weaving the words around unique ways to imply a multitude of different understandings of who or what the Creator was, and how exactly they were connected to Valencia and what they would do next now that they had returned. What shocked everyone was the announcement from the Colored Ways that, with the expansion of Cavalieric energy helping to shape this world towards a bright future, that the Creator intended to design and create a new celestial body in the universe. The nations of the world were all together going to vote on what that celestial body would be, what would happen with it, and how the new celestial body would relate to Valencia, making the whole beginning of a new world lie in the hands of this one and how the voting would go. The vote was decided to be over a year from now, with the leaders of the country speaking for the whole decided people of their country, and explain exactly what they wanted from this new celestial body when the vote was to be held. The agreed upon most similar votes would then be collected and given as the final decided celestial body that would be designed by the Creator to add to this universe. From the Creator's standpoint, this solved the issue of no longer needing the Source to fully design and create ideas, as with the death of Alabaster, while the Creator had gained their power, they were still struggling with the understanding of the Source and, furthermore, the End's capabilities under the new laws of creation within themselves. It was a process for them to learn and develop upon, but of this new power came an immense want to add to this universe, and an immense sadness based on the loss of all that once was that drove them forth to create. From the dragon's standpoint, this was almost a second chance at Genesis, a new seed to wash over and grow, guiding the world to a new future, and allowing a new type of celestial body to exist. The dragons were awestruck at the possibilities of not only possibly providing rest or restructuring to any of the dragons, but furthermore new concepts and new planetary scale things that each could interact with. The dragon themselves were happy with all of the possible ideas, solidifying their own vote as neutral. From the Colored Ways standpoint, this was a new beginning and a possibly unruly one. Whatever could be dreamed of could happen on this new planet, and it could be made unruly or ruled under jurisdiction of those on Valencia, connected or separated, such that it could be entirely different from this world's body, or something so important it would change Alencia entirely. It was agreed upon amongst each of the knights, however, that, like each of the dragons, they would not interfere in any way, shape, or form, merely following suit with what each of their dragon gods wanted, a new place to dream up and interact with this world in some way. From the rest of the world's standpoint, three concepts were mainly being bounced about. A new planet, akin to Alencia, where peoples of mayhap similar or even different types would live and prosper, of which was shared by many wishing to study and learn of this new world they were dreaming of. An idea towards a new future. The second idea was a new celestial body that they would initially call a star, like Sylvari and Darvanas' name mixed together, which would in turn inevitably develop to the much more naturally sounding star, which would provide light and spectacle throughout the world. Distance was the agreed upon variable that shaped whether this would work closer to Sylvari or Darvanas' style of interaction within the world. An idea towards the present. The final idea was a return to what had been, and was mainly supported by those who wished for a return to prior to the Darkmoon War, and was the creation of a new moon, which for some meant unaffiliated with the powers that be, such as demons, and for others meant a full return to the reconstruction of the chains. An idea towards the past. Finally, with the scene set, there are two more forces that lay unannounced to the world and how their needs shape this inevitable design. The realms of Alteris and Nilvoy. Two struggling realms that were, prior to the universal collapse that led to the empty universe Alencia now resides in, help upkeep the natural order and the nature of this universe. With their overarching balance slowly crumbling, unlike their related realm of the Astral Gate, which had found and tied itself to Alencia when the Moonseed had landed upon it. They had no place to tie themselves to, and their realms were slowly becoming nothing without a creation to attach themselves to. The Creator knew this, which is what pressured them to do this vote, and make the celestial body. The struggle was going to be his decision to only make a place for one realm to tie them both to, as with the time manipulation the Creator would need to perform, their innate aspects of being the same, but different, often unique, but still one and the same, would bring them together until he could design a twinning system to separate them but keep the two realms together. Overall, this entire story centers around the inevitable tie of each of these two realms to a singular new celestial body, to keep them as minimally damaged and hopefully save the universe from destruction without their interworking forces they each provide to the universe. Fehone, City of Criminals. And with all that mumbo-jumbo and preamble out of the way, we finally get to begin our discussion on the real story we're covering today. God, the lore is dense. Of the countries within Alencia voting on the new celestial body was the country of Awaye, which had the man-made island of Fehone, akin to our real-world Venice, within the Great Lake that Awaye had mostly contained within its boundaries. The Awayean Lake, or Fehonian Lake, depending on your dialect, and the island of Fehone is where we will be focusing on entirely for this story, as the War of the Gangs that lived within and upon Fehone that was about to break out is where truly the story of the final deciding vote originates and deems exactly how the new world will be formed. For your understanding, of the world's countries, Awaye is the last country to vote in the celestial vote, as the government of Awaye stays constantly in flux with its 8 ruling gangs that interfere and collude with its effectively non-ruling face government that exists. Overall, it's these 8 gangs that truly decide the country's future, not the government that is supposed to. These 8 gangs are the Kolbar, Mendari, Indranu, Corserta, Enforsa, Nidavi, and Formuji. And here's what each stood for and what they wanted of the celestial voting. The Kolbar were formed of a highly technical group of craftsmen and focused scientists, mainly working within the education system, and use alchemists and arcanists to mass produce highly unsavory goods as weapon dealers and master chaos creators within their scrappers. When they heard of the celestial vote, they were the only ones wanting to get a nothing else is necessary type vote to the creator. Their goal was simple: use the materials they could find to make their own planet, which would be a mechanical dreadnought, and rule it with their own process and prowess as the only members capable of running the machine planet that they wanted to construct. The Mandari were formed of a highly specialized underground crime syndicate. With hands so deep in the political system, they were pulling strings to set up wars and the likes within the world. They had one goal in mind with the idea of a new celestial body, and that was the reinstatement and more localized control of chain bases to the moon, reinstating the daemonic power instead of relying on Cavaleric. Again, obviously this was bad, but they were able to manipulate many by silencing most of their problems with their highly trained assassin network, granting them a good hand despite their well-known nature. Their secrets ran deep, however, as we will discuss later. The Andranu were slave drivers, with a leader who was a cavalier who had unbelievably high soul energy potential. Their end goal was to inevitably establish this leader as a global power source of cavaleric energy, and with the control that would provide, create a new world order of hierarchy, classes, and castes focused around the magically innate peoples of Valencia, with the option of a new planet with no barriers to entry other than getting there and getting set up on the table. Their goal was to play the long con and control that planet instead, separating themselves from the current low-lives they found themselves among, and, with the power available to them, rule with an iron fist and dictate life itself on this new world. The Carcerta were a group based in naturalism and the ways of fate itself. Take Wardens and Druids and Arithnomancer that MDOT has, and throw them all into one group with the sole purpose of letting life live as it is, and let the lawless world define itself amongst its own anarchy. And that was the Carcerta. They were very chaotic in nature, with much to be desired in terms of how they interacted with the others. Their goal, when hearing of the Celestial Vote, was to have a new planet made, but push it so far out it could never once interact with Valencia. Live and let it go were their thoughts. The Nadavi were highly historically focused figures, who believed that there was still plenty left to be discovered within Valencia, with plenty of stories still to unfold as well. Their goals as a group were the acquisition of many ancient relics of the world and preserving them away from those unworthy to view and interact with these relics. Effectively, they're hyper-control freaks, blind to the possibilities a new world could have, but they were sanctifying this blindness as a strength that kept them solid. They obviously didn't want any new planets, but rather wanted to make the inner parts of Valencia more accessible, and more rich with these artifacts that they were searching for, with a hope of more ease of researching and more ease of access to these beloved relics. The Vermuji are a special case amongst the eight, not really interacting with the others in any way particularly against them. The Vermuji are a group of organized demon hunters and demonologists, using their powers and capabilities for handling, trapping, and controlling demons as a mean to showcase that they could be trusted with a new era of demonic energy. They were demon hunters through and through, and their goal was the reinstatement of a moon that could summon demons, so they could live in an infinite hunt of these demons, inevitably wishing to genocide the entirety of that kind with their amassed powers and anti-demonic materials. And that include the humanoid demonkin races as well. Yeah, they took it a little too far. They believe themselves to be holy and righteous in this endeavor, seeing demon blood of any kind as a scourge on the world. A relatively terrible thought, knowing what good has come from demonkins, but I digress. Their importance in this story still remains. The Regala are also unique amongst the others, with the structure being focused on the religious rebirth and reconstruction of the Colored Ways, with an end goal of finding and creating a theoretical way of light, as discussed within our episode covering the dragons. They saw this as their true goal, and determined that if one lived holy enough via many tenets that were to them the true meanings and intentions of the dragons, they could have their Messiah born to them, to become the White Knight of this supposed way of light. The celestial vote to them was an opportunity to sanctify and place dragon gods on a pedestal separated from the Linciae. They wanted a star, but within that star they wanted the Draken Isles to be brought there, so as to isolate the dragon gods from the rest of humanity, so as to elevate them above the people of Linciae, so that only their inevitable White Knight could speak with them. An idea that, agreeably, would be a massive shift for this world. Finally, the Enforcer, the group that most resembles your expected heroes of this story. And they're actually amongst some of the worst in Fehone. They are overly aggressive crime fighters whose goals are the reinstatement of the natural order of Alaye. However, they do so with no care of the damages done to its people or the innocents. They'd happily slaughter a few of their own if it meant reducing the amount of enemies in their way, taking justice to extremes and claiming themselves to be righteous over all the other gang members. They were the only group with no preference at the end of the celestial voting, but are important to the story due to their interruptions and problems caused during its key and pivotal moments. There is, however, one more amongst these 8. The 9th and final gang, its formation, and how it won out over the rest, is our true story today. We begin our story now about a month after the vote's announcement, early in the morning, as shipments come into the harbor. Same day, new story. Milo John, a paladin under the Regala flag, is riding his arcane board to the harbor. An employee at the Golden Grick, a bar near the center of town, he's had a lot on his mind recently, especially with the way that his life is leading him. He's relatively unhappy with the tenets and abuse of the Regala, against their concepts, and overall, he's depressed. He's being forced to work and stay amongst them because, well, if he doesn't, his daughter and his life would be at great risk. He's looking for a change to the same repeating structure of in and out of work and home, promising his daughter the time he's been missing giving her due to the Regala propaganda work, then being forced to go work on propaganda and live by these hateful tenets he despises so much. As he rides across town, he watches all the different people wake up around the town, carts being brought to the port where everything comes in and everything goes out of Fehone. The Golden Grick has a few shipments he's gathering from the ship and bringing to the bar, but he knows that many of these carts are amongst the gang members, here to bring whatever horrendous law-breaking goods they need. Too much tension has been in politics recently. He picks up the shipments and gets on with his life, as he always has been. Chained in one of the boxes, Soren, a new slave under the Andranu, attempts to transform to break himself out of the coffin his captors have trapped him in. The silver burns on his skin, ripping into him and making him sick. He just can't escape. He's tossed in a cart shortly after. He'll be a great workhorse for the Andranu machines and a great entertainment in the arena. After all, blood beasts like him is a rare and devious sight to behold. His life and inevitable death would fetch a pretty penny for the Andranu, if it wasn't that fate had different plans. On the boat was a shipment of some greater insects parts, and a courier and saleswoman in Scrothy, a Drafonian and her greater firefly mount, Eco. She's here in hopes to get a satellite branch of her parents' greater insect farm out here in Fehone. She's not intending to start her own bug farm innately, just sell some parts here and inevitably manage the process of exports and sales over to Fehone, seeing as it is a major trade point within the world. But she, like many others at this time who weren't from Fehone, didn't know nearly the limitless potential found within this town's undercity. Not yet, anyways. Across the town, hungover from a night of drinking their asses off and spending some of their last funds, Rattle and Cragback groggily get up and prepare to return to their different projects and works. Cragback working towards making tools and weapons for money and a hope to rescue the friends that got him out of his Andranu slavehood, and Raoul, a now cursed peon who's been on the worst of his luck for a few years after a school incident left the Azure Light to be cursed to only speak as an alloy. Hoot. Except for some strange and peculiar reason, his friend and terrifying goblin in Cragbeck can perfectly understand every word that comes out of Raoul's mouth perfectly, as if there was no curse whatsoever. He's been receiving some extreme plans from his employer, the Kolbar, who've been working on a secret plan that Raoul hadn't fully learned just yet. This plan, of course, is the man-made mechanical planet I was discussing earlier. And Raoul here was making the cascading nuclear core, which would be its power source. And finally, with the morning peaceful, sweet, and calm, was Saki, friend of our aforementioned Milo, and a bard with a penchant for death as a scout for Mendari assassins. She joined in with them due to her interest in demons after nearly 20 years prior. Her town in the Theonentios Desert was nearly destroyed when Fagar III collapsed the pyramid chain base and then stopped it not too far away. Having become attached to the history of demons and their prowess and powers and capabilities, Saki found the idea of work in one of those chain bases fascinating, and her dark intrigue and inevitable disappearance of her family due to some dark ties they had, which further exposed her to these demonic powers, inevitably brought her here to Fehone, where she now resided, working as a bard by day and scout by night. Her interaction with the rest of the aforementioned members is what truly makes this group and the inevitable ninth gang they form unbelievably important. For now, however, what's important to know is that these 6 members aren't vaguely or loosely connected at all. They'll be running into each other really, really soon. Like tonight soon. Promotion for interest. That day, Cragbeck would receive a message from some of the still captured Indrani slaves, stating that apparently, with one of the incoming events, the slave group believed they could massively cripple the Indrani and get many of the captured slaves out of there. It'd be risky, deadly, and they needed some of their prior escaped slaves on the outside to be willing to come back in. Cragbeck, with immense respect for the group and their leader Dravkal, who mentored the goblin into honing his skills as he has, had an obvious obligation. He was a bit of a loudmouth, however, so discussion of this event was something that could easily slip out if our old friend Raoul wasn't there to shut him up when necessary. As Saki would return home from her morning stroll, she'd find a letter detailing that she was to meet with the leader of the Mendari that exact night for an important discussion at an overly fancy and high-end restaurant near the center of town. Way out of her price range, she was worried about it, but knew that if she was called, there was no escaping whatever wrath was coming to her. She'd spend the rest of the day fearful for what was to come. As Soren was unloaded and shoved in a cell below the Indrani base near Serenity Round, the political center of Fehone, he'd meet with Dravkal and the other members looking to revolt against their slave keepers, and inevitably get himself involved with this escape plan as hyper-aggressive muscle. His time with the slave group is cut short as he has to be kept on a very short leash by the guards, but what's important is that he's in the now. Furthermore, in response to the letter being given to him, Cragbeck and Raoul go scouting around Serenity Round and catch on to the shipment going into the Indrani hideout. They also overhear a whole bunch of talk about some important shift that the Indrani will be making soon. A shift that involves some of the main playing members of the Indrani all gathering up to discuss something. They couldn't hear it, but they saw a box that they knew was carrying a new slave as well. Another nail in the coffin to push them to act. All the mentioned characters, other than Soren, seeing as he was still trapped, all for their own separate reasons, were going to be at the Golden Drake that night. Cragbeck and Raoul wanted a drink in celebration. Poor Milo worked the night shift and picked up the delivery this morning. Scrothy just needed to find a place to kick up her feet for the night after a relatively unsuccessful day, and Saki, as she had done many times before, needed to perform for some money at her favorite show space to make sure she could meet with the mysterious leader she needed to talk to. Milo would overhear some whispers of some plans going on when Cragbeck would speak too loud, and Scrothy would effectively force herself into the conversation using Eco as a conversation point to intrigue the goblin to talk more about the event. Cragbeck, loving the bug, just chats and chats and chats, and while she was focused on her own work, Saki, with the money she earned, takes her leave with a simple message to Milo to get in on whatever this hellish thing this goblin is yapping about. The two were very close after all, and actively looking for ways to help with Milo's situation. Mayhaps this was the way out. So when the bar had basically cleared, Milo locked the three in, figured out what was happening, and gave the three a simple, stern yet giving talking to about how he'd like to assist with this hell, but they needed to shut up or they'll all get killed faster than anyone else here in Fehone. Effectively, Milo agrees to go turncoat officially on the Regala, saying that if he helps with this, they need to help him with his situation in the future, somehow. Meanwhile, Saki was hurriedly rushing across town to the meeting place, tidying up as best as she could for something she knew she was unbelievably underdressed for. She arrived just barely on time, and had prepared for the night with her best clothes, and upon her entry into the Silk Aurora, she heard the arrival of a horse-drawn carriage outside. Turning around, she saw a wonderfully handsome devil of a man, quite literally, as who she saw was a demonkin human, with many demonic spikes growing out of the right side of his face, and crimson red eyes with a singular rose adorning his suit. He entered with a grin and spoke very gently and happy with Saki. He, however, was a terror to everyone in the restaurant, who immediately knew him just from arrival and immediately brought him to his table. The man that sat in front of her was Istranu, a very deadly and dangerous man, which immediately showed his strength from his access to innate magic, summoning objects and creating flames without tomes, feats implying he had many tricks up his sleeve. The meeting was simple, if not terrifying. Saki, if she so chose to be, was going to be receiving a promotion from a simple scout to actually getting her hands dirty as an assassin. An Adavi supplier just came into town, with one with something Estrada wants, and killing her was the easiest way. He'd been impressed with her work in the past, and her skills in the field were too good to go without notice. As she was his best scout, he figured she'd make an even greater assassin. Saki would choose to accept, flattered and relieved it wasn't something worse on her plate, and happily took the dive deeper into the pit she found herself in. She would need to meet with the others, seeing as Milo just got them in on something she believed to be major. Crippling the Andrano. Milo would gather the group together, Saki reluctantly joining in after hearing the plan, more worried about her own skin than anything, but decided the best thing to do to help her friend was to join in. They planned to enact their part of the jailbreak within a week's time, which only had one slight issue. The target of her first assassination was going to be leaving town in 1 week. How do I put this shortly? Instead of being reasonable and spending time trying to make things work in a normal fashion, Saki and the crew would effectively decide to not only handle the jailbreak, but hopefully use the chaos to kill the supplier when eyes would be off of them. Of course, Saki wouldn't tell anybody about this, however, it became her intended plan. I'm skipping through a lot of past time and work here. However, do note that during this time frame, Saki scouts out her target and learns her schedule while Ral and Kragdek finish Ral's assignment, and prepare weaponry and armor for the group. Their plan was to stealthily bring themselves into the lower areas of the Andrano base while the major political talks between its leaders were occurring, seal themselves away into the major control room, and unleash all the slaves during the talks. And, magically, it somehow worked. Help from the other slaves where they could get it, from good lock picking and good stealth helped, and Soren chiming in to break things down with his blood feast abilities greatly strengthened the group as they prepared for the final part of the actual plan, the escape. As soon as the gates were open, alarms effectively started going off, alerting all of the Andrano members to what was happening. For many of the slaves, they had already escaped before this mattered. Drabkel and our team would all escape easily, Drabkel even punching a hole through a guard with his well-trained fists. No kidding on that. Straight up one-punch moment here. However, as they finally got through a concealed tunnel, which had been used as a port for freeing other slaves prior, they saw the right-hand woman of the Andrano, Grisera, her fearsome whip blade, diving in to slaughter the sheep. It's a brutal scene, and almost as soon as it began, she was hunted by the Enforcer, which were no match for her, but enough to draw attention away. Besides, now the world knew of the Indranu. They'd have to shift things and change plans. With eyes off her target, it was a simple slip of chloroform and nighttime escapades to turn the target in on time. And Saki watched as scary skeleton-like horses carted her target off into the farm fields of the island, to be killed elsewhere, as she was told by Astranu to do. With the Indranu slave secrets opened, the Mindari, Kolbar, and the others would clear up the leftovers, effectively filling in the now created power vacuum, and removing the Indranu threat effectively for the rest of our story. But they'll return for just a little bit. Act 2. E-Corp. With our team now having collected themselves and worked together, they began to trust each other more and more. Over the next couple of weeks, Saki would get assigned a few new assassinations to complete, slowly integrating the others into her plans and working with the others to amass more funds, and inevitably, with the help of Dravkel, would start to hunt the leftover Indranu that had fled to the Undercity sewer network. Dravkel would get mortally wounded from this, becoming more of a teacher for the other freed slaves in his sortie, and having to retire from the freedom fighter work. During the scrounging, Kragbek convinces the others to return to the old Indranu hideout, seeing as it is now emptied out, and try to scrounge up any materials they can. It's a relatively successful venture, helping them gain a lot of initial gold and become quite rich from their escapades. This is heavily important, as it's what helps truly start the 9th game. As the weeks go on, the Mindari learn of a Formuji demon hunter coming into town with apparently a deadly weapon to kill Astranu. And of course, it was our best friend Saki's time to shine and go kill another threat to the Mindari forces. And so, with the help of everyone, they scouted out the Formuji base, discovered where it was hidden, and prepared to attack, but none could prepare for the falling chaos that was to come. Regala Explosion. Our group swooped in late in the evening, unlocked the entry they had found in the Formuji base, and, with the best stealth they could muster, attempted to sneak their way into the catacombs. However, upon getting just a little too deep, an alarm system went off, alerting all of the members, including the head demon hunter Galamir Bato, the target Saki was after, as he and the other members were finishing a ritual to make his blade into a true demon-slaying sword, capable of rending demons asunder with a single cut. This was highly threatening to the group, which included a few demonkin, and while they tried to stand and fight, eventually the wrath of the Formuji all attacking the 6 members all at once was way too much for them. So they ran with a whole group of the Formuji, chasing them down to hunt them, running across the city and effectively riling all the other gangs up in the chaos. Soon, as they ran and caused damages across the town to build more and more chaos and more of the 8 gangs entered the fray, they had separated themselves from the Formuji as best they could, but also split the party in doing so. During the split, Ral and Saki were able to outmaneuver Galamir Bato, getting him thrown into the river and using Ral's lightning magic to kill him, and quickly scooped up and stowed the Demon Killer's blade for safekeeping, before continuing to escape their pursuers. As they attempted to regroup, they found themselves about to be cornered, except for one place, the inside of a Regala-owned church, which connected into their network beneath the city. And who do we know that's part of the Regala? Milo quickly explains the plan to everyone, who all quickly rush into the church, into the back room, where Milo immediately begins to quickly work to open the secret entry. They wanted to get spotted, which they were, and very quickly barricade themselves so as to blame the event on the Regala, opening the path as the door gets busted in. Without any care for what was ahead of them, they rushed into the Regala catacombs, using Milo as a guide to run them through one of the edges of the base, leading the Formuji into the heart of the operation and exposing the Regala to all the other gangs in one fell swoop. This effectively kills off the Regala, as in the struggle that happens from this exposure, the leader of the Regala is killed in battle, freeing Milo from his chains that kept him bound to the Regala, and marking the end of the game. With the exposure of the Regala to the other groups, our group is easily allowed to escape and finally lose their pursuers, and after the dust is settled, Saki meets with Astranu again, who, having now learned of her friends, challenges her allegiance to the Mindari. She swears perfect allegiance to him, claiming them to be effectively tools for her plans rather than anything else, and that the materials and weapons provided for the party had been highly beneficial in her planning. As part of this, she also gives Astrani the very weapon the Formuji had planned to kill him with, which he laughs at and toys with. Unfazed by the blade that should make a demonkin like himself revolt out of fear. Saki is utterly terrified of the implication, but isn't allowed to worry for long before he teleports away as a personal stashed weapon for himself. He then states that he figured she was using these friends of hers as nothing more than just tools, and says the Minbari have secured the empty catacombs of the Regal base for her, if she wanted to take it over as her own personal quarters, claiming that her work had been invaluable in exposing not just one enemy, but multiple for all of the Minbari. Effectively, the escapade that just occurred would guarantee the success of the Minbari vision of a new chain moon for his success. He then further invites Saki to see the dividends her work has allowed, finishing the dinner by bringing her on a boat ride into the secret home of the Minbari, where, after a walk through the cultist town, reveals what the Minbari truly stand for. Astranu is the Grand Demon of Pride, and with Solgar gone, explains that with the recreation of the moon, and with no void getting bound to it, his power and the power of all demons under his control would allow for the Minbari to rule not just Fehone, but the world. And she, if she held up the game they were planning, would be his right-hand blade to kill any who stood in opposition. Saki was obviously shocked, having seen what all the demon was planning to do, but knew that there was no turning back. She was in the den of the beasts, with eyes constantly on her, and no chance to find a way out. Not yet, anyways. E-Corp proper. With a now open Regala base that had been gifted to Saki, the group essentially has a whole new place to fill and construct whatever they need, and with the money they had acquired so far, and at the request of Scrothy, invest into two separate businesses at the same time. The greater bug part industry and the metalworking industry with Kragbeck's knowledge. This is truly where our ninth game begins, as with the entry of these businesses, the group employs the freed slave group as workers and helpers for the business, effectively gaining near-to-easy labor from the rapport they had built with Dravkel and guards for the gang in one fell swoop. With their beloved bug Eco being effectively the mascot of the group, the gang agrees to name themselves E-Corp, housing their workers in the base and effectively having it built up as the friendliest of the gangs, more focused on rounding up and fixing the issues. Of course, under the current assignment, E-Corp isn't officially a gang, as that would be against the Minbari and would cause major issues. With E-Corp now officially underway, however, the group amasses funds unbelievably quickly, being accelerated into a massive business, earning hundreds of thousands of gold within the first month, which gets reinvested towards the business and its employees. Effectively, Saki and the gang just attempt to be good bosses for their workers, keeping everything moving as best they can, while Saki keeps the assassinations she has to do for the Minbari to keep things moving for them. All the while, Raul keeps working as best he can to upkeep his required work with the Kolbar. But he wants out now that he has a new life set up for him, and he makes a plan to get himself removed from the group by putting defects and problems in his work. Not the smartest of ideas, as this is the Kolbar who we're talking about, and perfect quality is of high importance to them, but it's what he goes with. And then, as if by sheer luck and perfect fate, Saki gets given her biggest assassination request yet, to go kill the leader of the Kolbar, Kragbeck, the Sphinx of Culminance. Kolbar's pressure. Yes, you heard me right. Kragbeck is the name of not only our goblin friend, but the name of a Sphinx who is the leader of the Kolbar. And the Sphinx is the thing who cursed Raul into not being able to speak. Saki informs Raul of this, hoping to enrage the owl and get him to help her once more. But with his plan of escaping fully set in motion, he agrees before he even gets told about how to fix his curse. The group plans to scout out the Kolbar and attack when the time is right. However, the Kolbar themselves aren't that happy with what has been going on either. As Raoul turns in his most recent assignment, an entire group of anti-Raoul units, and yes, they are basically Kolbar-designed units with perfect weaponry to control and kill the owl if he tries anything, all corner him and force him to come quietly, lest he perish where he stood. With miraculous luck, he escapes, blowing a hole in the enemy forces while the rest all attempt to attack, and runs, attempting to reach a teleporter he had set up as part of his work in E-Corp, hoping to lose his pursuers. He gets forced to hide in the library, which, as the Kolbar attacks, goes up in flames, collapsing the structure and allowing him to escape silently as best as possible, and losing his pursuers in doing so, barely making it out with his life. Having now removed his tie to the Kolbar, he very quickly gets the rest of the group to help remove the Kolbar threat with him and Saki, having them accelerate their plan from within a week to right the next day, going into the college where the Minbari scouts had believed to have found a possible entry, and using what the info they had, burst into the Kolbar base, with all 6 of our party fighting for their lives against the entirety of the Kolbar. With all the powerful equipment they had made, they pushed through the deadly forces, as bullets flew across from the Kolbar to them, and blood was shed, leaving each of them weak and faltering, until finally, they met with the Sphinx. With all the power they could muster, the group slew the Sphinx, dismantling the tech he was using against them, and inevitably killing the Sphinx with Raoul's lightning magic, as if by revenge for the curse given to him. With the Kolbar defeated and their plan stopped, the Kolbar base would inevitably get scrapped for parts for E-Corp, greatly increasing their influence and power, setting them well ahead of many of the other gangs. The all-out war of the gangs that followed would be swift and easy. And finally, Raoul could speak. Act 3, All-Out War. With what had happened, the group effectively gave themselves to the Minbari, with Saki giving a final plan statement that when the time came, and only the Minbari remained, that they would turn on them, so as to remove all the evil that they had uncovered within the Minbari. For now, however, they would turn their focus on the remaining gangs of the Corserta, Formuji, Nadavi, and Enforsa, taking them down one by one. The Enforsa, while easy to rile up, were hard to get removed due to their sparsity and more spread out nature, but that was also a weakness to a group whose powerhouses hunted with such ferocity. The Corserta stood no chance with their passiveness, and were dismantled quietly one by one until fear shook their ranks and removed them from the fray. The Formuji were hunted as if they were the prey, using the knowledge of where the bases were located from their first dealings with them to take each Formuji base out one by one. The Nadavi surrendered out of fear for what was to come if they didn't, and just left for their mines and archaeological sites elsewhere in the world, never to gather again. And finally, as all stood to heed that Ashrani would take political leadership as a demonic overlord and cast the vote for all of Awaye, Saki used the only weakness the Grand Demon of Pride had, his closest compatriot, and assassinated him when his back was turned, claiming E-Corp the sole ruling power over Awaye. E-Corp would give the country back to its intended government, and tie themselves in with it so as to make sure no gangs or demons would rise to power under E-Corp's watch. And when the time came, Saki and the groups would be the ones to cast the vote to create a new planet, within a close enough distance to view, but not to touch, as a goal for the future of all peoples to reach out and bond together with. And that planet would be called Varys, the home of new life. With that, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this and like to see more, down in the description is not only going to be a playlist for the series, but a playlist for the campaign I'm running on this channel, Depths of the Lighted Heart. If you'd like to help out or just contribute to the ideas of Endod, fan art is always welcome and appreciated in the Discord server, also seen below. Leave a comment for any lore you'd like to see covered in the future, or if you're confused about something. I always try to respond to all the comments on every video. So if you'd like to know more, ask me there or in my Discord. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye!